Hi, my name is Aaron Solari, and for my lesson this week, I am going to be discussing the classical economist and the thought process behind it, and pretty much talk about what classifies someone as a classical economist in that thought process. I'm also going to be discussing lags and what different types of lags they are, and at the end of the presentation, there'll be short quiz you can take to see how well you've done and how well you know the material. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, the first slide we have is going to be the schools of thought. So, although we're focusing on the classical economists right now, there are four different schools of thought. We have the classical economist, Keynesian, monetarist, and the supply side. So, Keynesian we'll touch on briefly, and that is it's named after British economist John Keynes. And people who have the Keynesian philosophy believe that the government should use fiscal policy to balance the economy. And then going over to monetarists, they believe that um, you use monetary policy to balance the economy. So, what does this mean? Um, by affecting interest rates and the supply of money, then that will stabilize the economy back to normal. So I've included an example. The economy is struggling, so the government decides to slash interest rates to almost zero. By doing this, it encourages people to make bigger purchases such as houses and cars because the interest rate is so low, so it will save them money in the long run. But by doing that, you're also stimulating the economy quite fast because people who may have waited to make these purchases now are seeing how much money they'll save in the long run, and they're going to go out and do it now, even though the economy is struggling. So if they can afford the down payment, and closing costs, and their monthly mortgage, they'll be more inclined to do this now since their interest rates are going to be lower. We'll look at the supply side. So what is supply side? It's a small government, very few regulations, and the main focus for the supply side school of thought is a focus on production. So really just get out and make as much of whatever as possible and just get that done. So now we've briefly touched on those three. Let's take a look at what is a classical economist. So Um, in simple terms, it's no government intervention, and people who believe in the classical economists also believe that there are automatic stabilizers. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more because that's very important. Um, and then the old time thinking that the economy will always come back is really the backbone of classical economists. This thought has been around for centuries that the government is designed to never totally crash and never totally peak to a point that's just so far up or down. So they truly believe that there are things in the economy that will always bring it back to sort of an equilibrium. So let's take a look at what some of those things are. So, what's the definition of an automatic stabilizer? It's an automatic stabilizer um, is a feature of the economy that keeps it in check when it's doing well, and it gives it a pulse when it's struggling. So what that means is, say something like, um, you know, jobs are through the roof and people are making more money, their income's higher. What's going to happen is the taxes for that person are going to rise. So it's going to bring it back down so that way, you know, it it doesn't just keep getting higher and higher with nothing given. You always have to give something back. And when the economy is struggling, automatic stabilizers always give it some sort of pulse. So if you look at right now what's going on in the country, um, with everyone getting laid off work because of COVID, So that obviously hurts the economy, but that's what unemployment's for. It gives people money back so the economy doesn't totally go in the tank. So it always ebbs and flows. Um, so why is this important? Even though factors such as taxes can fluctuate, there's no change in legislation. So even though you could be put in a higher tax bracket, that's already predetermined. So there's no government intervention, which, to be a classical economist, it's one of the key factors of it is that there's no government intervention. So these things are already built into the legislation so that nothing changes. We'll look at a couple examples. So when the economy is good, like I talked about, the taxes will rise. You'll pay more taxes the more money you make just to balance it out. And then the more money you make too, the less eligible you become for government benefits, which include things as unemployment, food stamps, um, Medicare. So stuff like that you won't be eligible for. They save that for people who do not make as much money or anything. And then, so when the economy is struggling, like it is right now, a lot of people are laid off of work due to COVID. So unemployment rates are through the roofs and very concerning levels, actually. But with people collecting money on unemployment, it's saving the economy. And then things such as food stamps and other government benefits, um, those also help significantly in a time like this where food should be a necessity. It is a necessity, so it should be for everybody. So these are just a couple examples of automatic stabilizers, how it keeps people afloat and keeps the economy afloat. Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about that is very crucial to have some sort of knowledge of is a lag. And here we go. So I'll be honest. When I first took this class, I never heard of a lag or what one was. I had no idea. But I put it in here, where have you heard this term before? So a lot of people in this day and age have played video games online before. And you will always hear someone say, "Oh, I'm lagging. I'm lagging." Like it's talking about a glitch or a delay in your internet process. So that's a good way to kind of remember that term is if you associate it with what happens during a video game when there's a lag. There's a delay in your internet connection. So this is no different. In the economy, a lag is essentially just a delay in whatever process it is, depending on what lag it is. And I'll get more into that in a minute. I'll talk about the kind of lags. And so let's get into it. Right. So there are three different types of lags: recognition lags, legislative lags, and impact lags. And I'm going to use an example that kind of ties in for all three of them. And um, a lot of times you can see it kind of go in that order: recognition, legislative, and then impact. And I'll show you what I mean, but it's not always like that. But with my example, because of COVID, we have a timeline. So I can show you a little bit and discuss how these are all connected. So let's look at recognition lags first. What is a recognition lag? Well, if you break it down, it's pretty simple. Recognition, what does that mean? It's when you see something and know what's going on, and then we talked about the definition of a lag. What's that? A delay. So a recognition lag is just a delay in what you see, basically. So the exact definition of it is the delay between when an economic shock happens or a sudden boom or bust. So you don't really have the full. Yeah, sorry, you don't really have the full feel for it. My laptop just glitched out a little bit there, so I think you're still with me. Perfect. Yeah, so you're basically late on responding to what is happening in the economy, is what that means. So let's say for COVID right now happening, let's go back to it. I put an example up for Greece, and during the recession in 2008 here, it didn't happen just to the United States. It happened to everyone across the world, especially European countries. And Greece was probably hit hardest by it. These countries had debts that were so high, and they just could not meet. There wasn't enough money in the economy to meet them. And Greece crashed really, really hard because nobody saw that. Nobody saw that coming. No one saw that happening. So I put Greece here originally, but I want to talk about COVID because, you know, we are not technically in a recession yet because it takes 2 quarters back to back of the GDP shrinking. So we're not quite there yet because we had a strong first quarter, but it's coming. But for the first probably month or two of COVID, it's very, very easy to say that we were in a recognition lag. Um, no one took it seriously, and nobody really saw what was happening to the economy. Businesses were closing, 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 and then all of a sudden, boom, it's like the door closed and the whole economy was shut down. So it's an example of a recognition lag. Then we'll go on to the next one, which is legislative lags. So same thing as recognition lag. It's very self-explanatory in it. So when dealing with the legislative lag, it's the time that it takes to propose and pass a plan. So legislative, obviously, legislature or stuff along that lines, and then lag, you have that delay again. So just an example of that now is continuing with the COVID, the stimulus package. I put a nice picture of the house right there. It looks pretty peaceful, so they weren't talking about the COVID. Um, but so the initial proposal came out for the CARES Act, and there was the delay because it needs to get voted on and approved and then sent through and then voted on again. And so that's a legislative lag when it's the time from when it was proposed to the time when it was passed. And then lastly, we will take a look at impact lags and what they are. So that is the time that it takes to see the impact that the new policies have on the economy. So once again, pretty self-explanatory. So those new policies that were made, say, in the legislative lag. So, for example, the stimulus plan, and the CARES Act, and all that stuff. So when do you see an impact of that? So from the coronavirus, one thing that was passed was interest rates being slashed. So I discussed that earlier. You're seeing the housing market sales rise. So you're seeing that impact almost immediately on the economy to really boost it. And you'll see that throughout, like unemployment rates. Some people are making a lot more money on unemployment right now than they were when they were actually working. So you're going to see them spending more and more and more frivolously. You're going to see that stimulate the economy. So that's what an impact lag is. It's just that time it takes until you see actual the the actual impact that those policies made are having on the economy. And then the last slide I have here is a link to the quiz I made for you. I know everyone's going to be so excited to take that. I know you're probably not going to be able to click it, but I will copy the link and put it in the comments section on this. So if you want, go ahead and do it. It's pretty simple. So I think everyone will be fine. And thank you for your time. Everybody stay safe and have a great week. Thanks.